From tools of earlier civilizations to making things take flight, John Stoelting is a Las Vegas artist and educator fueled by curiosity. 13 Action News' Amy Abdelsayed catches up with the artist to show you what he's currently exploring and building.
John Stoelting likes to make things. Well, most things.
Swords don't interest me at all. There's a lot of people who make swords. I like butter knives.
As an artist, he's inspired by something so many of us take for granted.
Stuff that people use to actually live on a daily basis. Those are the things that are more interesting to me.
Ordinary, everyday objects. Take this bar of tin he smelted.
Did you get the crank?
As John explains, that sound is called the cry of tin, and the noise comes from the crystalline structure of the metal.
Makes sort of that crunchy sound when you bend it, and the weird thing about it is if you let this sit for a day or two, those crystals will actually sort of re-knit and it'll do it again.
John is an art teacher at UNLV and the department's facilities manager.
So I basically just fix things.
Fixing things is something he's been doing all his life.
When I was a little kid, I was always just taking clocks and stuff apart, but as I got a little older and into high school, I think it was more about I couldn't afford to go buy a lawnmower, so I'd get one off the side of the road and fix it.
Messing with mechanics only fueled his curiosity.
I like to figure out what's behind the mystery. As a kid, I always figured I'd go into space or fly an airplane or something.
The first thing he did after high school was get an aviation degree.
I worked in aerospace and I built airplane parts and built little bits for satellites and stuff like that.
John uses science to help answer the how and why behind life's everyday little mysteries. But he says art helps with that too.
They're really a lot closer together than people tend to realize.
For as long as he's been tinkering, he's also been creating artwork.
Since I was a little kid sculpting, I really liked clay. Eventually the art won out.
John moved to Las Vegas from the Midwest to attend grad school, and he has a Master of Fine Arts from UNLV.
Las Vegas has kind of become white noise to me, like the Strip and stuff like that. I think the desert around influences my work a lot more.
Recently, he started showing his work again. He calls his creations part experimental archaeology.
Currently, I'm just doing lots of small metal castings and things that are kind of, I'd say, on the verge of jewelry.
In October, he was the featured artist at Available Space Art Projects with a show called Miscellaneous Debris.
It's my first show in 6 years.
It was 6 years ago when John became a dad.
It wasn't really an intentional hiatus, it just kind of happened, you know?
Now that she's a little older,
Faye, my daughter, she helps me a lot.
John likes to go hiking and find raw materials for his work, like different kinds of metals to smelt or interesting rocks to polish.
She gets her own sack and she'll get the reds or the greens or whatever for the day.
If you couldn't tell already, he's a history buff, which is part of what inspires him too.
I'm very interested in like the Bronze Age and the late Neolithic, and I think part of that is just because you could go out with a couple of rocks and create society, basically. I mean, the people were really making everything we've got here today out of just the natural, raw world and doing it by hand and doing it without electricity or the internet.
John creates historical reproductions with some of the materials he collects.
This is a fairly accurate reproduction of sort of a middle Bronze Age razor. This is what they would pass for as a mirror in the Bronze Age, basically.
At the Barrack Museum, kids can touch and feel a bronze chisel while learning about Aztec history because John made one just for that. I asked him what he wants people to take away from his work, and at least for his Miscellaneous Debris show, John said it was pretty straightforward.
Everything here, it's just sort of like that hairpin is a hairpin, the knife is a knife. There really isn't any grand concept behind it. So it's really very much about the objects, I think.
Still, I couldn't help but notice every object had a story, including the tiny ecosystems on his desk.
That's super tiny. He's about the size of a grain of rice, if not smaller.
This one comes from a sample he collected while at the wetlands with his daughter.
I wanted her to see sort of the scale of the world and understand that there are lots of, little things. And so we went down to the wetland, of course, created those ecosystems. I guess so she can see that she's really giant,
So much of what he makes is to better understand. Learn more about John's work at ktnv.com/things to do. For How To Vegas, I'm Amy Abdelsayed.